Welcome, and thank you for tuning in. Today, we embark on a journey to a small village gripped by fear. A mysterious creature, unlike anything they've ever encountered, has disrupted their lives. As whispers of this giant lizard-like being spread, one man takes it upon himself to uncover the truth. What he discovers will challenge everything he knows about the natural world. So, settle in and join me as we unravel this gripping tale of courage, mystery, and discovery. When Chuk gets a call from a small village that they are being terrorized by a giant lizard-like creature, he finds it hard to believe at first. Only when he comes face to face with the animal does he realize it is real, and dangerous. He has to take action immediately and come up with a plan to capture it, but then he still has no idea what he is actually dealing with. Chuk had managed to shoot the giant lizard-like creature with the tranquilizer, and now it was just a waiting game for it to kick in. This did not take long, as soon after the injection the creature started to slow down. When it had come to a complete stop, Chuk and some of the villagers wasted no time tying it up and loading it onto Chuk's truck. Only now were they able to get a good look at the creature and realize what it was they were dealing with. Chuk could barely believe it, but there was little doubt in his mind when looking at the head of the lizard. But what is the giant lizard-like creature, and why was it such a shock to encounter it? Before we start, smash the like button and make sure to subscribe if you haven't, and hit that notification bell so that you won't miss any new stories. When Chuk first heard about the mysterious lizard, he was waiting to discover that it was all a joke or a case of mistaken identity. At first, the description of the lizard made him think of a crocodile. However, knowing where the village was located, Chuk ruled it out. It was too dry there for a crocodile to venture that far and survive. The only logical conclusion is that it was an ordinary-sized lizard and someone was making up silly stories. Chuk played along in the beginning and let the first caller tell him the whole story. He didn't take it seriously though, but once more and more people were begging him to help, he started to wonder if maybe he'd been wrong. When things like that happened, Chuk almost wished that he had competition in the area. He ran the only reptile rescue and animal control service in the whole region. People would call about venomous snakes or pests, but he'd never had a call about a gigantic lizard before. It seemed impossible. He had to find out for himself. It would take several hours to reach the remote village. He'd packed several pieces of heavy equipment, but as he continued deeper into the countryside, he wondered if maybe he should have brought more. Chuk was surprised by how overjoyed the villagers were to see him. It looked like practically everyone who lived there had come out to greet him as soon as he arrived. Once Chuk was settled, he started interviewing the villagers to gather information. The lizard had attacked last evening and disappeared with one of their goats. It had been doing the same thing every night for almost a week. They were convinced that the pattern would continue. If it was all a prank, Chuk decided it was a good one. The villagers looked terrified to even leave their houses. The villagers had managed to take a few pictures. No one dared sneak up on it, so they were grainy and shot from a distance at night. But when Chuk studied them in great detail, he realized that there was one important clue that no one else had noticed. He couldn't believe his eyes. In the very corner of the picture, Chuk could just make out the image of a tire from one of the villagers' vehicles. That gave the picture enough perspective for Chuk to see how big the animal really was. He took deep breaths as he considered what he was facing. Chuk had no idea what he was going to do about the lizard-like monster. He'd originally planned to capture it and then figure out what to do next, but that was off the table. It was too large. He wanted to study the creature and find out more about it. In order to do that, he needed to catch the lizard alive. But how? Chuk was still working on a plan and talking with the villagers when suddenly there was a great commotion in the distance. It took Chuk a minute to realize it was the sound of screaming. The lookouts had spotted the lizard and were racing to the main village to take shelter. Some of the braver villagers brought Chuk to the outskirts of the village to observe the lizard. It liked to hunt at the outlying farms where there were fewer people and more livestock around. The creature was just preparing to vanish into the trees with a goat trapped in its jaws. He'd rarely encountered a reptile that he didn't know on sight, and that didn't exactly apply to gigantic ones with unusual scales all over its back. Chuk only had one idea about what he could do to bring down such an unbelievable creature. The only option he could see was to use tranquilizers to sedate the lizard so that he could load it into the cage built onto the bed of his truck. But there was a catch. He needed to find more tranquilizers before it came back. Luckily, Chuk knew all kinds of wildlife professionals in practically every region of the country. He called up some friends and worked out a deal to get as many tranquilizers as possible. Since he didn't know what would be effective, he was open to any concoction. Chuk called his employees at the reptile rescue and told them to get ready for the biggest lizard they could imagine. They would have to clear out an entire retreat to ensure the creature didn't escape or hurt any of the other animals. Chuk set up the tranquilizer and other equipment at the same farm on the edge of town. The lizard seemed to like hunting there, and the villagers had done their best to funnel the animal into the same spot to give Chuk the best shot. In the midst of the commotion, Chuk stood aloof, arms crossed. From his vantage point, he studied the newcomers. Chuk watched as the scientists set up their equipment near the water's edge, a place where the creature was often sighted. Their keen interest was evident, and it didn't sit well with him. "They're not here to study it," Chuk whispered to a friend. "They want to capture it." His suspicions grew as he overheard snippets of their conversations, plans to contain and transport the creature. The journalists weren't much better. They scoured the village, cornering villagers for interviews. "How do you feel about the creature?" one reporter asked a mother clutching her child. "Are you afraid?" asked another, thrusting a microphone in the face of an elderly man. The press only heightened the villagers' anxieties. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Chuk gathered a few trusted villagers. They huddled in his home, maps spread out before them. "We need to guide the creature here," Chuk said, pointing to the farm. "Keep it away from them." They devised a plan, placing lanterns and making noises to deter the creature from the scientists and journalists. By nightfall, the villagers had assembled all they'd need for the ambush: nets, ropes, and most importantly, the tranquilizers Chuk had set up. Hours seemed to stretch on endlessly. Chuk and the villagers lay in wait, eyes trained on the farm's entrance. Past midnight, a shadow stirred at the water's edge. It moved stealthily, its form barely visible under the pale moonlight. As it crept closer, its silhouette became clearer, revealing scales and a long, sinuous tail. It was the creature. Taking a deep breath, Chuk positioned the tranquilizer gun, waiting for the perfect moment to release the dart. The dart soared through the air, landing with a soft thud on the creature's flank. Moments passed, but the creature seemed unfazed. It continued its exploration, seemingly untouched by the tranquilizer's effect. The villagers exchanged worried glances, a collective dread setting in. Had the tranquilizer failed? The creature's demeanor changed suddenly, from curious to agitated. It began thrashing its tail, creating violent ripples. With the creature rampaging, Chuk's mind raced. Another shot might be too risky, but doing nothing was no longer an option. Taking a deep breath, he reloaded the tranquilizer, whispering a silent prayer. The second dart found its mark. The creature's thrashing slowed. Its movements became sluggish, and its roars diminished to soft groans. With bated breath, the villagers watched as it slumped to the ground, subdued at last. Relief washed over Chuk and the assembled crowd. Immediate efforts were made to secure the creature, ensuring it posed no further threat. As the first light of dawn crept over the horizon, the village was a stark contrast to the tranquil place it once was. The scientists, with their white coats and clipboards, approached the creature with an air of excitement. They began taking measurements, noting down observations, and discussing their findings animatedly. Their preliminary assessment revealed the creature's unique anatomy and hints of its possible origin. But as they worked, the creature's heavy breathing reminded all of its vulnerability. Dr. Elise Mitchell, a leading biologist, scribbled notes captivated by the creature. Its physiology puzzled her. While it bore semblance to known species, there were undeniable anomalies. She pondered its origins, wondering about possible undiscovered habitats. But amidst her scientific curiosity, she also sensed the ethical dilemmas surrounding its captivity. The team of scientists, led by Dr. Mitchell, embarked on a comprehensive examination. They collected tissue samples, tested its blood, and observed its behavior. While analyzing the samples, Dr. Mitchell stumbled upon a startling revelation. The creature's DNA showcased an unusual blend of genetic markers, hinting at its hybrid nature. This finding, if true, made the creature even rarer than previously thought, further intensifying the debates about its future. Whispers of the creature's uniqueness reached the outside world, drawing more attention and visitors. The village, once peaceful, now sat on the precipice of major upheaval, with the creature's fate hanging in the balance. Dawn broke as trucks and equipment gathered at the village perimeter. The mammoth task of transporting the creature commenced with utmost care. The creature was gently moved while villagers watched in a mix of awe and apprehension. It was a journey fraught with risks, but hope prevailed that the creature would find a more suitable home. The research facility, with its state-of-the-art enclosures, awaited the creature's arrival. As it was released, it cautiously explored its surroundings. Over time, signs of distress faded. It began interacting with water features and showing curiosity about its new environment. Scientists and caretakers ensured it felt as natural and stress-free as possible. In the facility's lab, as DNA sequences flashed on screens, a groundbreaking revelation emerged. The creature was indeed a hybrid, a cross between a crocodile and a giant salamander. This discovery sent ripples across the scientific community, rewriting known taxonomy and reshaping understanding of species evolution. News channels buzzed with the latest findings. The village was abuzz with excitement and pride. Scientists marveled at the evolutionary implications, while debates ensued about nature's boundless mysteries. The revelation brought fame, but also intensified debates about ethics, conservation, and mankind's interference in nature. The once quiet village transformed. Tourists flocked, eager to learn and witness the creature's habitat. New infrastructure sprouted, and educational programs about conservation became a staple. The village, while thriving, also faced challenges in preserving its heritage amidst the wave of modernity. Gazing into the horizon, the village and its inhabitants stood as a beacon of hope. The creature, now a symbol of nature's enigma, underscored the importance of understanding and respect. With concerted efforts, a harmonious future lay ahead where both mankind and nature thrived in mutual respect and admiration.